I thought the whole point of hiring a new head coach right away was to prevent the entire team from entering the transfer portal. Well, for Iowa State, I can tell you right now, it definitely has not played out that way.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, now the #1 sports podcast network. I'm your host, Nick Marovets. Thank you for making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. Be sure to hit subscribe down below so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. Today's episode is completely loaded. Like, I'm talking packed to the brim, and I can't wait to get it kicked off talking about all of the players that are entering the portal for Iowa State. Obviously not the highest note that we're going to start on, but it is a very long list. I want to knock this out, get it out of the way. We'll talk about, who's going to be missed the most for Iowa State this season. But then the bright side is in the second segment, we've got a pretty long list of guys who are coming back and staying as Cyclones for next season. Who's going to make the biggest impact? The list is actually, this is kind of a situation where there is bad news, but there's also kind of just as much good news. This is actually a feel-good show, which is surprising considering how the transfer portal has gone so far. And then in the third segment today, we're going to break down Iowa State's new quarterback coach and why there's a very, very interesting wrinkle there. So go ahead and stick around for that. I cannot honestly wait to get into the second half of today's show. But first, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. But we have to get started with who is leaving Iowa State, who is entering the transfer portal. Now, you guys know by now this list is just getting ridiculously long, and that's why I started the show by saying wasn't the whole point to hire a head coach right away and prevent players from entering the portal. I don't think if that was the case, it hasn't played out that way. That wasn't the actual reality for Iowa State. This list is ridiculously long. I think there are definitely still benefits to getting it done right away, and I think Iowa State kind of knew who they wanted to move forward with, specifically Jamie Pollard. But nonetheless, let's jump into this list here. A lot of new names on this list, and I'll recap some of the most important ones at the end. But first up, we got Alex Mansky, quarterback, entering the portal. Brendan Black, offensive lineman, entering the portal. And I'll go back through and kind of talk about each one in depth a little bit more here. But Jace Gilbert, kicker punter, if you will, entering the portal. Benjamin Bramer, Gabe Burkle, Caleb Bacon. That three combo, 1-2-3 punch right there, not ideal. Tayshawn James, defensive back. John Klosterman, linebacker. Vi Ikalola, offensive lineman. And then I've also got, is this Michael Parks, the wide receiver, will be entering the portal as well. I've also got, guys from the last few days. Brett Eskelson, Xavier Townsend, Jeremiah Cooper, Jontez Williams, Rocco, Kaishan Cummings-Coleman, Carson Hansen. The list goes on and on. And in general, nobody wants all of these names to be entering the portal. I think we can all agree on that, especially some of these huge names. Like Iowa State is losing some massive, massive pieces for next season. The guys we've already talked about, Rocco, Cooper, Jontez, Brett for sure. Carson Hansen, I was shocked by. Xavier Townsend, a guy I thought that had a ton more potential, just wasn't quite tapped into there. But the guys from, the last few days that have announced they're entering the portal, like Alex Mansky, had a ton of upside. I think there was a lot to be excited about with Mansky. Brendan Black, a key part of that offensive line this season. The line is a position group that I'm not super hopeful about, unfortunately, moving forward. I think we've kind of gotten a glimpse into what that could look like just over the last few days, and it's only going to get worse, I think. Excuse me. And the last, the three biggest names I think on this list, like you could argue Klosterman is in here as well, but Bramer, Burkle, and Bacon, I think were probably three of the biggest names that are going to hurt Iowa State the most. Obviously Rocco, but he only had 1 year of eligibility left, and it's kind of a, I understand the situation. I understand the decision there from Rocco, but that was a big one. Carson Hansen, I felt like was a huge hit for Iowa State. Brett Eskelson, I also thought was a guy that I really wanted to keep Brett and Carson Hansen around. And to call it how it is, to be completely honest, Hansen was a name that I thought we were going to keep. And I talked about Bramer and Burkle in the same way. Why? Tyler Roll is the new OC for Iowa State. Was the running backs coach just 2 years ago for Iowa State, and last season spent the year up in Detroit as a tight ends coach. I was like, you know what? This is like the perfect scenario for those two position groups. So we're getting a coach that these players are familiar with, who has seen success, who's been at the NFL level. Hansen, Bramer, Burkle, 3 names I genuinely did not expect to be in the portal. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I don't know if they just didn't see enough offensive upside. Generally speaking, I would say that there's been a little bit more, not inconsistency. That's not the word I'm trying to use. It's, uncertainty with the offensive side of the ball. With, Jimmy Rodgers, very defensive-minded head coach. We've talked about Bobbitt and what he could do on the defensive side of the ball. I think there's a lot of hope and a lot of positivity on the defensive side of the ball. And I would categorize it probably as uncertainty on the offensive side of the ball. So I'm wondering if that's where this comes in. But I genuinely think that for those 3 guys, for those 2 positions, I was shocked. I really was. You could find it on the tape. I said multiple times, like, I really feel pretty good about the tight ends. I feel pretty good about the running backs. I mean, I guess Abu Sama, we'll see if he decides to stick around. He could now kind of take on that RB1 role, which would be exciting for him with Hansen entering the portal. But yeah, these are 3 major losses for Iowa State. The tight ends, remember last offseason and all season long for this team, that was a position group that Iowa State leaned on heavily. To tie back to the offseason, that was one of the position groups I was most excited about. One of the groups that I thought had the most talent in it and had the most, the ability to make the most impact. We talked about how tight ends will impact the running and the passing game because their ability to block and their ability to go out for passes. How many games did Iowa State win this year because of Bramer or Burkle making unbelievable catches or just being consistent throughout the course of the game? And to stick with that tight end, theme here, because these are 2 new names in the portal, so I feel like we should probably talk about them more. We've already talked about Hansen, but I don't have the stats in front of me, but I do know going into the Iowa game, Iowa State was, I believe, 2 or 1 in 12 personnel, and 13 personnel. I think they were just straight up number 1 this last season. Now, that was early on in the year, and I'm pretty sure it only got more and more, defined towards the end of the year. Iowa State ran a ton of 12 and 13 personnel, meaning just more tight ends on the field. Now, granted, new OC, going to have a different offensive approach, identity, but all of that to say, those tight ends were a huge part of this team, a huge part of this offense, and I'm very interested, I guess, what's going to happen, because it's undeniable the impact that they had. And you're not going to be able to lean on those guys. You're going to have to find a way to get offense in a different, avenue or get creative or whatever. It's going to come down to what the portal looks like, who gets added to the team through the portal. Jimmy Rodgers is going to have a very tall task in front of him now with Burkle and Bramer out. Caleb Bacon, one of those guys too, I wanted to take a second and talk about, because my goodness, that guy plays with a ton of heart. I mean, what we saw from him this season was just unbelievable. Would have been a great name to retain. And I am, to be completely honest, a little bit shocked by the amount of loss on the defensive side of the ball. We talked about the uncertainty versus what feels like a strong suit in the defense. Losing Cooper and Jontez, Kaijan, now Caleb Bacon and Tayshaun James and Klosterman. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, to be completely honest. I would love to keep Bacon for next season. And at the end of the day, for all of these guys, I'm just wishing them well, have fun at your next destination. But Iowa State, myself, all of the fans, we're going to continue to support this team. So I'm just kind of letting you guys know who's leaving. And I do think these guys will make their presence will be felt. The fact that their presence isn't there will be felt. But at some point we have to move on and just worry about what the team is going to look like next season, right? I can be shocked all I want. I can be upset all I want. But at some point, Iowa State is going to have a team out there next season, and we're going to be rooting for them, right? I'm sure a few people will keep track of these players. But at this point, I'm ready for next season. And we have started to, I will say this is good news, get some posts out there, get some announcements. Hey, I'm not entering the portal. I'm staying right here in Ames, Iowa. Who's doing that? We'll talk about that coming up right here after this. But first, a word from our friends over at FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. Live spreads and money lines adjusting instantly, player props updating as guys heat up. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. I am so pumped, unbelievably excited to announce this list of guys who are going to be staying at Iowa State this next year. I mean, we have gotten so much bad news, it feels like, of just relentlessly post after post online. Every 10 to 15 minutes, it feels like there's a huge name that is leaving Iowa State. And thankfully, we have a list now of some guys who are going to be sticking around. And I cannot wait to break into this. But first, I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Cyclones your first listen of the day. Thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Just really quick, if you haven't already, go check out our new Everydayer Club. I have a link down in the description in the show notes below, or you can just go to lockedoncyclones.supercast.com to learn more. It's a great opportunity, a great club, access to ad-free audio feed for Locked On Cyclones. It's compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other major podcasting apps. It's an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server. It's just a great opportunity. Go check it out in the show notes. Check it out, at that link I just threw out there. Appreciate every single one of you guys for listening every single day. You're the best. All right, let's dive into this list of guys who's sticking around, okay? And I will say, I'm sure you know who's on this list, but there is a name on here that I am unbelievably excited about. I mean, we'll get to it. All right. But first, the first name I want to bring out is Bo Goodwin. Will be sticking around. We'll get into each of these guys a little bit more as we get through this segment. Aiden Flora, a name that I am super excited to announce will be coming. Well, I guess I'm not announcing. I'm just conveying the information. But to talk about the fact that he will be coming back to Iowa State next season. Carson Willick, another name. Jack Limbaugh, another name. Dom Overby will be coming back. And the name, honestly, that saved my week. Kyle Conrarty is returning to Iowa State next season. We can already have the conversations now. Should we build the statue? And I'm not even really joking at this point. We've been talking about all of these guys leaving Iowa State and who is going to be, entering the portal. We honestly don't even talk about where they're going because it doesn't matter. I guess there is a chance that they could re-sign with Iowa State, but at the end of the day, they're probably not going to be Cyclones. So we're just kind of talking about it, moving on. And we've had the conversation of these guys who are sticking around despite what they've gone through with the coaching change and everything. The guys that are staying in Ames are absolutely going to earn kind of a legendary status very quickly, like almost immediately as soon as you announce, like, hey, we're staying around. I personally am like, all right, I'm going to remember this name. Like guys like Bo Goodwin, Aiden Flora, Carson Willick, Jack Limbaugh, Kyle Conrarty, Dom Overby, Connor Moberly, Jack Bjorn. These kinds of guys, this is not the entire list, but they are going to be remembered when we talk about, Iowa State in 5 years, 10 years. You remember when Kyle Conrarty stuck around, even though Matt Campbell left and basically the entire team left Ames? You remember when Jack Limbaugh? You remember when Dom Overby? I mean, we were talking about this, obviously seen a lot of family this week. And for Rocco, it was, if Rocco stays around, he's immediately on a Mount Rushmore of quarterbacks for sure. I think you could probably argue he is still, but for Iowa State, right? I think he now steps into that category. I think Kyle Conrarty just put himself on the Mount Rushmore of Iowa State athletes. Like you go in and you could pick any top four you want from any sport all time. I think Kyle Conrarty's on that list just by announcing to come back to Iowa State. Obviously, been a very consistent force for Iowa State over the last 2 years, and most notably, longest kick in Iowa State history, 63 yards, 2 54-yarders in back-to-back years against Iowa to come away with the win and to earn the first win at home since I want to say it was 2011. I mean, the guy, I don't know if he will ever pay for anything in the town of Ames ever again. And I mean that. This unbelievable. The fact that we are keeping Kyle Conrarty, it really felt like Iowa State needed a win on the transfer portal front, and that was a win. Now, a couple other names on this list that I have to break down. Number one, Aiden Flora. At the running back position next year, provided Aiden Flora stays a running back, because he's kind of like an athlete. I believe he's from ADM, and he, plays some quarterback there. He kind of could be all over the place. So provided he stays at running back, and that's more of a compliment than anything else, because he's able to do anything he wants. This could be a major keep for Iowa State in the running back game, just now with Hansen entering the portal. But the other side of it is, as a punt returner, this guy was electric this season. Absolutely won Iowa State a few games, saved a few games, even if not explicitly winning them the game. The kid is lightning in a bottle. I mean, it's insane, actually. When you watch it and you're just like shocked what he's able to do. And in a couple of instances this season, he has been the reason that the team has kind of turned around their play. He could provide a touchdown here or there. Obviously, the one I'm thinking of is TCU. But if he rips off some sort of touchdown run or long return, that's not the only thing he's doing. He's also giving juice back to the team. And this has been this is a great announcement. This is a great acquisition, quote unquote, for Iowa State. We've been talking about, and should Iowa State do like posts or conferences, or like how do you want it? Like, let's make this a celebration. This one was a celebration along with Kyle Conrarty. And another name that I really want to dive into here, we can get maybe to a few of these other ones, but Dom Overby was a name that I actually threw out when kind of the first initial wave of guys were announcing they were going to enter the portal. And I was looking at the wide receiver room, and obviously I wanted to keep Brett. I wanted to keep Chase Sowell. I wanted to keep Xavier Townsend. Those are the top guys for Iowa State this season. But Dom Overby was a name that I immediately circled. And I think anybody who's just looking at box scores, who's just looking at season stats, they might say, well, Dom Overby didn't really do a whole lot. I think we'll be okay without him. I think that the potential for Dom Overby to be a legitimate red zone threat, consistent force for deep balls, I think it's absolutely there. Like, this is a guy that you can lean on. I think he's 6'4" is what he stands tall at. The guy is electric. He didn't bring down every single ball this season, and I get that, and that's something that he has to work on. But it's absolutely there. Like, the talent is there, and the height also is there. That is something you can't teach. That's something that is just innate. And I've got it right here. He is standing at 6'5". A lot of time left as a freshman, 6'5", 200 pounds out of Utah. Like, I actually am surprised that keeping Dominic Overby as a freshman like that, I thought the young guys might be at a little bit more of a potential threat to leave just because they don't have a ton tying them down to Ames. That height, that young, this is a kid that can really bloom into be one of the best wide receivers that Iowa State's seen in quite some time. Obviously, we've now had a long list of great wide receivers, and the trust from Overby in the system that Iowa State's going to have next season really does make me feel good. So, yeah, some of these other names like Carson Willick, Jack Limbaugh, these are guys that I'm excited to return. Bo Goodwin as well. But that Kyle Conrarty, Aiden Flora, and honestly, Dom Overby. I don't think a lot of people are talking about Dominic Overby and what he could be next season. It might not be next season. It might be 2 years from now, right? It might be 3 years from now. But I think that Dom Overby staying the course, staying at Iowa State is a very good thing, a very good sign. I'm super pumped. Like this is the list of guys. I keep writing it out every day because I got my show notes right here, and I write it out every day that I talk about it. And every time it makes me be like, man, how are we going to be okay, man? Like, how are we going to be all right? There's just so many guys on this list, so many pillars of this offense, of this defense. We've kind of got our pillar on special teams, which is awesome. Kyle Conrarty staying around. Obviously, the punting game will be, we'll have to figure that out. But this list of guys that are staying feels to me like some hope. Like, not everyone's going to be leaving. And some of these are big names like Flora, Conrarty, Overby, I think are probably the biggest three, but Moberly sticking around. Carson Willick, I like this. We're going to be okay. This was a breath of fresh air. Relax. It's going to be fine. We're going to find a way. At the end of the day, there are still some Ames kids on this roster. It's not the end of the world. It really does feel good. This was a feel good segment for me. I really wanted to bring it up, and I hope that this if it didn't make you feel better, at least it breathes some hope into your, I don't know, would that be ears? Thank you for listening. But like, yeah, this is good news. Absolutely. All right. One more piece of news, whether it's good or not, you can decide. We'll talk about that coming up right here after this. But first, there is nothing like college football season, tailgates, packed stadiums, and being right there in the middle of it all. The energy, the bands, the moments you remember forever. But actually getting tickets, that part used to be frustrating with long queues, logins, and prices jumping at checkout. That's why Gametime gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to unlock amazing college football tickets and experiences in just a few taps. I opened the Gametime app to look at some upcoming college football games. It's bowl season, baby. And the app was incredibly easy to use. I went from browsing to buying tickets in just a few minutes. And my favorite feature by far, by a mile, is the ability to view my view from my seat before buying it. I don't have to deal with the maps. Like, what does that actually mean? It's confusing to me, but I can just actually look at what the seat view will be before I buy it. It's a game changer. Absolutely. Knowing prices include all fees up front as well makes the whole process stress-free. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Now that we've talked so much about the transfer portal, this last segment is going to be perfect here at Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. When Jimmy Rodgers announced that he was going, or when it was announced that Jimmy Rodgers was going to be the next head coach at Iowa State, it was, okay, I wonder how Rocco's going to fit into this system. And then once Rocco Becht kind of announced that he was going to be leaving, there was a level of uncertainty around the quarterback position. But now Iowa State has hired a new quarterback coach, and I think we may have our answer at the quarterback position as well. Let's start with the coach. Keith Heckendorf will be the new quarterback coach for Iowa State this next season. Was the OC/quarterback coach out at Arkansas State last year. And wasn't just last year, has been there since 2021 coaching quarterbacks, but has actually been in Arkansas State since 2019. Spent some time at North Carolina prior to that. He's kind of bounced around a little bit, actually. Went from, let's start Nebraska at offensive quality control in 2005. Stayed there till 2007. Went to West Carolina, then to North Carolina, then Arkansas State, then North Carolina, then Arkansas State again. So kind of bounced back and forth here. But he spent the last 6-ish years, 2019 to now, at Arkansas State. And starting next season will be the quarterback coach for Iowa State. Now, obviously, Arkansas State, an opponent we are familiar with. Okay, Iowa State beat them 24-16 last season to move to 4-0. Remember the last game of that opening stretch from Ireland back home, South Dakota, Iowa, and then Arkansas State. That 4-game stretch that Matt Campbell talked so much about. Iowa State grabbed this win, but there was one guy in this game that gave Iowa State a lot of trouble, and I'll get to him in a second. But when we talk about Keith Heckendorf, I went through and looked at some of his stats at Arkansas State from the last 5 years or so. And I have to be honest, none of these stats really blew my mind. Like, they were, bottom, I would say, 50% or so. I don't know what the exact percentile would be on a lot of these, but nothing too crazy when passing. But 2024, they had a really good year. EPA per play of 0.07, number 43 in the nation. But pretty solid around the horn, honestly. At plays per game that they were passing, total EPA per play, EPA per game, success rate, all between 39 and 43 in the nation, except for success rate, which came in at 56 in the country. So pretty solid success in 2024. This last year, they took a pretty, honestly, major step back. EPA per game down to 99th in the country, EPA per play at 95. They did see, number 6 at plays per game when passing, but number 46 at success rate. So, I could dive into all these advanced stats. Havoc rate they were in the first percentile this last year. Didn't love that, but their passing success rate was at 66th percentile. So a lot of back and forth on these stats, honestly. Just diving into them, I wasn't able to draw, a ton from them, and I just want to throw that out there because I think a lot of people will be super excited about this hire. I think that there is a lot to be excited about, But when I look back at the stats that Arkansas State, was dealing with, I will just say this: I was not exactly blown away by them. However, that being said, for one, he's at Arkansas State, and Arkansas State in the Sun Belt, probably going to be a tough place to really get onto the national stage. Like, let's just call it how it is. But the one thing I did find is Arkansas State in 2021, 2022, very different from 2023, 4 and 5. Why is that? A quarterback by the name of Jalen Raynor. Okay. And you know who this guy is. I know you do, because you remember that Arkansas State game. In Iowa State, Arkansas State showdown, Jalen Raynor went 19 of 33 for 222 yards and an interception through the air, and carried the ball 16 times for 83 yards and a touchdown with a long of 21. This guy was a problem for Iowa State early on in the season. And remember, he was a reason that we were having a lot of conversations about, like, where is Iowa State's defense at? Can't really stop Arkansas State. Held them to 16 points, yes, but there was a lot of, like, if Jalen Raynor can do this. And that was kind of the story of Iowa State all season long as far as quarterbacks go. But this guy has been on a tear and has single-handedly, like, uplifted what Arkansas State has done offensively in the last 3 years compared to the 2 years prior. So while I'm not going to sit here and give honestly, maybe this is a little negative of me, but just looking at the stats, I'm not going to give Keith Heckendorf a ton of credit here. Like, I'm impressed in general that they were able to get to some of the heights they were. And he worked with Mitch Trubisky, which I don't know if you remember him out at UNC. Didn't really pan out in the NFL as much, but certainly made a lot of noise going up to the draft and up to his NFL career. But Keith Heckendorf has worked with some high-profile names and has seen success. So I'm not taking all of his success away from him. But what I've seen from Arkansas State is that Jalen Raynor is kind of the underlying factor. And why am I talking about Jalen Raynor so much? Well, he is in the portal with 1 year of eligibility remaining. Obviously, his stats are pretty impressive. 36 games, startup, 9,877 yards of total offense, which is second most among quarterbacks returning in 2026. He has 67 touchdowns in his career. He has seen a lot of success, sustained success. Could he follow his quarterback coach, Keith Heckendorf, to Iowa State? Very possible. Very possible. And how do you feel about, Jalen Raynor potentially being the next quarterback at Iowa State next season? I don't hate it. I do not hate it. I actually think that this could be something that it would make a lot of sense for this team. Let's just say that. I think, the way that this team is getting pieced together, I think that would make a lot of sense, as opposed to what feels like a whole new everything and then a quarterback who's been around in Ames for 4 years in Rocco. This would make more sense for the style, the vibe around the program, but also the success that Jalen Raynor has seen. I think we could continue that into this next season for Iowa State. So I'm not sitting here hoping that Jalen Raynor signs with Iowa State. I guess we'll find out what that looks like probably on the 2nd. I would guess for a lot of these guys that are in the portal now, we'll get early announcements. Maybe not, but I'm guessing that. And then we can really dive into what it looks like. But for now, I am pretty excited about this. Keith Heckendorf, we'll see how he plays out at Iowa State. But if he brings over Jalen Raynor, even if it's just for 1 year, that could be really, really solid for Iowa State. That could open up the quarterback room as far as competition goes. We actually have a target and a guy that we could see next season. We'll probably talk more about Jalen Raynor next week. But for now, just wanted to throw that name out there as we go into the weekend. Keep an eye on that. Maybe do some research on Jalen Raynor. Do a little looking around. It's a guy that made a ton of noise for Iowa State fans early on this season, but I'm sure we all kind of moved on. We could be getting to know Jalen Raynor quite well upcoming season. So let me know what you guys think. Comments below at Nick_Marv on Twitter, on X. I appreciate every single one of you guys for watching, listening, and sharing your thoughts. Because this is the kind of community we're trying to build here. So shout out to every single one of you. If you haven't already, subscribe down below. It's completely free. Helps support the show, prove that it is in fact a Cyclone state, which I know every single one of you guys want to do. That being said, until next time, Cyclone fans, sayonara.